So time, time, time and energy has prevented me from being able to move on to this post. But I was like, well, I'll just use it as a time to think and gather my thoughts about how this short little post could be not modified, but like extrapolated and, milked for, and just, it leads on to a lot of ideas that I knew I couldn't really get to in the time or at the time, but that I knew would expand and unfold. And in a lot of ways, just in the last like week or two, I've had a lot of thoughts about like that all of this is really tied in over time, and even in recent events like the Notre Dame Cathedral, which I was like, I'll just start adding that up and go and calculate the blueprint, so to speak. And the first thing, the Notre Dame Cathedral. See, it takes some time to calculate it, but the Notre Dame Cathedral itself is 666. And like if I were to take it's not like anything equals that. Like let's take the word significant. SIGNIFICANT. It's 217. Obviously, you could change it with the shin instead of samek, and a teth instead of a tau, or a tau instead of a teth. You go back and take see, it's still not. You could take that though. Well, significant doesn't have another teth to take from and give a tau, but 608 I already know is only tau away from 999, but there's no more t's. So again, you can't make anything equal anything, but you could take 666, subtract 608, and find whatever 58, and then you could have a phrase that has the word significant in it, like the significant whatever 39 is. If there is anything, It just so happens that certain things do equal certain things. Like, so the Notre Dame Cathedral is 666. I also found that set the, or SETTHE, church, set the church on FIRE. So, or the church set on fire. So that's kind of funny too, with 666 being destruction. So with a gimel and this as a C, and a shin, DESTRU, gimel, teth, yod, an, none, destruction. And that's why, so could distraction could also be 666, with this, hold on, DISTRA, and I think it's, no, so it would be gimel. So DISTRATIO, distraction. So like the hypnotic spiral of, is what comes to mind, the key of mind control. Anyway, all these things connect. I'm just trying to show you that like only particular things do, and it's weird that the news cycles and history and all this shit, it's like a spiral. That's what comes to mind, at least. This spiral picture I found, it's like it's from Jacob Boehm somewhere, I forgot where, but it makes me think of like the the yellow brick road and the red brick road. I mean, yellow brick road, I think I've mentioned it, is a symbolic motif. YELLOWBRICKROAD. And then I found out that, the title of the actual book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, is 777. Another number dealing with language and patterns and geometry, and also of the mind and cymatics, obviously. So again, it's repetitive, but it's cyclical, and it spits like, a spiral. It's a circle, essentially, but it builds on itself over time. And so, to me, that symbolizes the fourth dimension. And obviously, well, what then is developing over the three and the fourth dimensions, it's obviously a sort of fifth, like the fifth element in a way. And when you understand that 5, the sum of 1 through 5 is 15, and all the Kabbalistic attributions of that, 15 itself, again, is data, and that's technically what's happening over time with magnetism, the 6 plus 9. And again, the I, experience, matter, the 15 being related to the square of Saturn as well. So, really, I think of pi as this sort of like, because they say it's an irrational number, it's technically infinite, there could be different possible variations, because again, it's infinite, and it's like, it makes me think of the spiral of time, and 3 being the root of it, obviously the triangle, fire, the supernal triad, and just that combustive potentiality of it. And then obviously we've made, I was talking in the last post about how culturally we attribute numbers to things all the time, so it's no surprise to find numerology in things. And Pi Day 314, or March 14th, obviously when you compound them together, 314 is a major value in like the Kabbalah, being Metatron and Uriel, all these things. It's only 19 away from 333, and 333 is this Kabbalistic field number again as well. So I don't know, the whole thing to me, it symbolizes this like golden thread, or the thread, or the spiral of the fractions, and the fractions which, are associated with the Qliphoth, but also I think the cycles of time, and what they call the fall, Doth, all this. The fact that there's an approximation from 22 divided by 7, and to me that's like, obviously 22 and 7 are hugely important numbers in the Kabbalah itself, especially on the tree. I think that fraction right there symbolizes the Ruach and individuation and the ego function and space and time. And again, when you study Gurdjieff and Uspensky and their whole cosmology, 7 and the octave and the whole dynamic play of time, I think, is pretty much symbolized and calibrated all in these formulae. If at least that's the closest we can get to sort of verbalizing some of it, I think. But slowly over time, it's like becoming a little more easy, I think, but at the same time, it's also very complex. So I'll just start reading this, and I'll start referring to the various things I wanted to talk about. So I said, today is Pi Day, so I thought it might be a good time to write about some of my findings regarding pi, as well as the first 3 digits, 314, which, taken straightforwardly as 314 or 314, has many interesting correspondences which connect to the Greek letter and word pi, and the whole formulae, concept, etc., and the Kabbalistic correspondences. Pi has been mentioned before in various posts already to be related to the Hebrew letter Pe. And obviously, Pe plus hey would be 90, which is pi, technically spelled out as well. And the 90-degree angle is hugely important in geometry as well, which has many symbolic connections through its tarot attribution to the Tower card, and having a literal meaning of mouth or tongue as it is stylized. So the language, the Tower of Babel comes to mind, all those correspondences. Pei, language, I don't know, it makes me think of Masonry in a lot of ways, and not in the bad way like, control and corruption, but in the sense of knowledge and just this transmission of knowledge over time. And again, the spiral adding or advancement, progression. This is significant since it is the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it is said that each letter pronounced with the help of the tongue utilizes 17 muscles, and according to some scholars, the tongue actually has a total of 17 muscles instead of 8. See The Sense of Taste by Harvey Levi Hollingworth and The Ear and the Voice by Alfred Tomatis. 17 is a number of prime importance in the Typhonian tradition, and a section is dedicated to it in Kenneth Grant's last book, The Ninth Arch, which I've mentioned, which gives a list of significant dates and events which had the number 17 figure into them. 17 is related to the concept of Osiris and Orion, and another coincidence is that 17 stars in the constellation Orion are visible to the naked human eye, Osiris being strongly connected to the eye. O's iris obviously being similar to the whole symbolism of O and iris. The eye and the tongue are primary Maotian symbols analyzed by Kenneth Grant in his expository work on the Typhonian tradition. Outside the Circles of Time talks a lot about those and the tower. The eye, or Anya, and the phallus and the hidden pillar, which is the inner angle. The eye, or Anya, is the receiver, the tongue, the transmitter of data, or doth, or gnosis, which is why vivid imagery and mouth noises, such as clicking and vibration or hissing, are strongly associated with communication between the higher genius and the lower self. As actual connections between the higher and lower, the number 314, which along with 17 combines into 8, the symbol of the higher and lower micro and macrocosm. So again, like the 3 divided by or linked to the 4, with again the pillar in a way. The 3, obviously, the supernal triad, and the 4 being chesed, or just the blueprint, is what comes to mind. Is the value of the Hebrew name of the archangel of Kether, Metatron, and the Jewish value of the archangel of Malkuth, Sandalphon. So there's a link right there in their numerology. 314 is also the Jewish value of Uriel, another archangel that is sometimes associated with Malkuth, being the light of God, or God is my light, and also associated with Vril, basically. So yeah, which in its original Hebrew form of Uriel is essentially synonymous with Vril, the life force contained in and composing Malkuth, or material form, and pervading the entire physical universe. Because Malkuth is not just Earth, or the body, or the ego. It's all of that. It's all of pretty much dense, like Dion Fortune says, it's the buoy of the circuit of materialization or manifestation, where energy goes to sort of like be projected, and it dissipates and goes back through a sort of like latency, I guess. But so it's very it can be confusing. Like, people confuse the tree of life all the time, but that's why I think slowly it takes time to even grasp. But then, unfortunately, then the time's up. The all-pervading supreme being of Vedic or Vedic tradition is Narayana, also 314, and a form of Vishnu. So Narayana is this like multi-headed serpent. So again, it's like the demiurge in the ego form, like it's the ego in a way, and it's multiple headed form. And so again, the seven-headed beast, the dragon or whatever, the Hydra. 314. In the form of Vishnu, the preserver and protector of the Hindu Trimurti or Trinity. As such, he is connected with the yogic stillness at the center of now or Lux. So all these different forms of the Buddha, or like Samantabhadra, or they sometimes simply Dharmakaya, they say the Buddha is like formless in his original state, and we're all just various like forms itself, like individuations or cells of the samsara, unfortunately composed of like suffering and friction, essentially, because again, the wheel, for there to be any manifestation, it has to have a sort of like, a balance, a frictive back and forth. As such, he is connected with, so again, the stillness, but also the rattles, and that's why I was talking about 333 in regards to the snake, the serpent wisdom, and all this sort of how it breaks into different subjects or different compartmentalized forms, and that's why 333 being this sort of like Silba, but also chaos, like it's perfect, still it's cosmos and chaos. And I know this sounds crazy, I'm talking like all over the place, but it really, like, it does, again, take time, and slowly it all comes together, then it's pretty clear. And so I'll just show you the stillness, and that's the formula to conquering Karanzan, pretty much. Like, I think Crowley said somewhere that, or maybe it was Kenneth Grant, I don't know, but it's like Karanzan and chaos is like mud and water, or it's, dirt and water making mud, and slowly over time it'll settle. And so that stillness is, I don't know, there's like an alchemical quality to the comprehension of that, I guess. And then the rattles. And so for a snake stands still and it feels the rattles, and obviously they use rattles as a sort of defense mechanism as well. But when you think of it in terms of like Kundalini and energy and magnetism in the magnetic energy center that together they create, it's, again, all this stuff, it's like self-referencing. And if you just take the basic Kabbalistic teachings into mind and memorize them, and then you see how it applies to these things, sometimes like without the people's knowledge, whoever came up with this shit. Like, that's why the more I study the Tibetan strain of Buddhism, the more I find it like mirrors the Western magical tradition, the Kabbalah, but without both of their knowledge, without the Hebrew knowledge, without the Hebrews caring or knowing or wanting it to be true. Same with English, but I think that there's a lot to be gained from studying, the Eastern traditions. And obviously that's why, again, Theosophy and stuff ties into all this. Theosophy, Blavatsky is hated because of the various things. She's pretty much blamed for Hitler's misconstruing and they went all over the place searching for shit to get power, basically, and control. And yet, people blame Blavatsky, and then obviously, like, she tried making money off people's stupidity in New York, because, no one gave a shit, I'm sure, about any of the knowledge in the Secret Doctrine or Isis Unveiled. So she's like, might as well make some money off these people. And obviously that backfired, because now she's just known as like a charlatan. And yet all this stuff is like eclipsed. Anyway, the traditional explanation of the name Vishnu involves the root vis, meaning to settle, cognate with vicus, village, vas, ves, so to settle, the stillness. In the Rigveda, to enter into, to pervade, glossing the name as the all-pervading one. 314 is thus theikos, or the divine resonance of the occult light lux, ever obfuscated, yet ever in plain sight. Again, with the whole Om formula, which this happens to be verse 47, and that's Om. And so to me, this whole spiral, all of this, it's going to be complicated, I guess, for some people to grasp, but if they have the knowledge and like study some of this stuff, maybe it'll ring some bells later on. But relating to the triad, 314 is the value of Mitsudomo. So the Mitsudomo is 333, and the Mitsudomo is that literal like triple symbol used in various Japanese things usually. Symbolic of the Shinto division of earth, man, and sky. Symbolic of the equal division of planes, with man balanced between the above and below, and past and future, within and outside. So again, you are the bridge in a way of that 3 and 4. There's an alchemical value in that. So in a way, it's like the I is bridging the 3 and the 4 itself, and there's an alchemical, I guess, quality to that as well. But again, the bridge, or the spiral, is the bridge, and it makes me think of this dream I had, and I think of that book, what is it, Road in the Sky by George Hunt Williamson. I don't know, I had some dream where it was like a road literally going off into the sky, and I can barely ever remember much about my dreams, but it was something specific I remembered. Probably influenced by all of this, but 314, the pi spell, or spell the pi, as in spell the letter pi in Hebrew English gematria and see the obvious pi value. And round it off, pi equals 3, and so Pithree. 3 is sacred to all traditions, as it is the primary structure upon which any formation is built, since it is the square root of our numbering system, which is 1 through 9. And again, the lunar number, this is where the lunar time cycles come together with the Saturnian time itself. 9 is the number of the sphere of Yesod, the foundation of Malkuth, the material and physical world. It's also got a mental or monastic quality to it. And just, again, this sort of like thread of life formulating over time, mitosis, which is, mitos is 620, which is kether, and means thread. And kether, again, is the one thread, the one substance weaving the one true word of everything. At all angles being really subsumed under the one, if you can comprehend that. And the Hebrew value of Yesod is 80. So again, the twisting of the infinite. 8 plus 0 spelled out is 314. And 8 is the twisted 0 or infinity sign or halo of the Magus. So again, the microcosm and the macrocosm, who has united the higher and inner and lower and outer selves across the veil of Yesod, or the veil of Paraketh, really, which is, again, the veil of the Ruach. 80 is the Hebrew value of Pe, which sometimes, again, the tower linking heaven and earth, which is sometimes spelled Pe Aleph. So instead of Pe He He in Hebrew, it can be Pe Aleph. So 81, which again, the field of 9 times 9. 80 is one less than 9 times 9, though. So again, think of these the breaking of the field, or the one step up and one step down in the Kabbalah always symbolizes like a sort of new creation. Every number, though, is a new creation. One being the number of the Magus, and the middle pillar, which unifies together the universal oversoul with Malkuth, the body, or the ego, the mask, through the Doth, or gnosis, of the heart, Tiferet, and mind, Yesod. Note, pi plus pe, 81, plus tongue equals 314 as well. The value of pi and pe spelled out. The tongue is, of course, iconographically, and again, the language, the tongues, is iconographically connected with the serpent, apep or apep, apophis or apeth, which is equivalent to pi and pe. And the coiled serpent is akin to the spiral of pi, and again, evolution, and the Gematria database list itself, the spectrum. 1 through 999 especially, or 1000, 10 times 10 times 10, the field, or the whole sphere, or the whole cube. The cube sphered, again, pi comes to mind. Anyway, the serpent link being 999, of the snake's language, and the occult knowledge, which is hidden in plain sight. And again, the whole thing about the beginning and the end end being calculated from the beginning. So, and 999 is to go periago, to go in a circle. To go in a circle is 474, which is Doth. And I don't know, I've just broken it all down, and now I'm just going to go back over it. Anyway, Genesis 3:14 says, "And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life." And so, I don't know, 314, the serpent, and 333 being this sort of like egg number. I think that it's kind of all pretty weirdly aligned. So I say, it is the Kundalini serpent which acts as a link between Malkuth and Kether, so again, as the tower, the serpent, in its reascent of the tree, symbolic of the ascent of the Kundalini Shakti, or serpent power, Shekinah, equal to Apep, which is transmitted through, I guess, the serpentine energy body of the DNA double helix. So again, the light body, or just the information, the data transmitted over time. The serpent DNA, and again, DNA is 55, which is 1 through 10. This whole ladder is ascending the tree through time, emanating from the seed, 314, as a spiral of fractal cosmic energy. And again, 333 being this sort of like seal, the sealing in a way, the seal, it's like with the spiral being infinite, this is where, again, in time and emanation and even emotions is 314, so the emotions is, again, the field over time, and where you kind of earth or create and flesh out into manifestation. So it's kind of where like the time is sealed over, like, I don't know, you're given that opportunity in the present moment to change the timelines, so to speak. But 333, it being this sort of like light years number, it makes me think of just how that's where things are sealed. And that's why things end up being sealed into these chamber numbers. How they emanate over time. Because it's all about this circle, and the circles are the wheels, basically. And again, wheels being 111. And so when you create through doing things ritualistically or routinely, That's essentially how muscles are built and strengthened, and same with the mind, same with manifestations of whatever we create or destroy. So again, with the dream time being 333, again, it's just how all this stuff crystallizes. Just as a serpent leaves its old skin behind, seed, again, 314, and so is Set, because like I said in that visions from the past, transmissions from the future, Set is 314. The Set, which goes with numbers like set theory and all that, 333, again, the set, the field, the numerical grid pattern itself. The seed or the shed or shed it, it's all symbolic of the same cyclical thing. The serpent eating its tail, basically. And so, I'm jumping ahead. Just as a serpent leaves its old skin behind, seed can also be spelled as shed, since both H and E are taken as he, 5 in Hebrew English gematria. Thus, the seed is 333, and so the seed, like the mustard seed again, it contains this universal like data complex, this web, the astral web, or the cosmic womb. The symbol of the triple spring, which could even be thought of as symbolic of the bed, basically, yeah, like a bed that you sleep in, and so people wake up at 333. 333, it's also just being the seed, it's the spring time, and it's Easter. So it's also the egg again, the Easter egg in a way. And again, Jesus, and 333 is associated with the dream time of sleep from which we spring from which the seed blooms into the tree or flower of life during the springtime. The rest of sleep is the stillness of the all-pervading Narayana, the supreme all-pervading soul of being. And so, yeah, it's just like, I see the similarity, having studied all this from different angles, between essentially all of it, even evolution. Like, that's why there's all these books. So I brought up pi. They say it's irrational, blah, blah, blah. And also this book, A History of Pi, he talks about how pi is like a mirror of history itself. And I think that, again, the thing about pi, or the thing about relativity, has everything to do with it. I don't know. It all relates. Everything's related. It's just where it's at and at what time. Pi has something to do with the wave of time, the fourth dimension, and like I was studying the whole Grail legend, the Grail, just symbolism and all that, and I realized 314 kind of veils that. It's right there in front of me, like the triad or the triangle, the trinity, and then the one, that ray, like coming in, forming the 4, basically, the final hay, the diamond, the prism. And so, I don't know. I can't really say it any clearer than that. Like, maybe you can get it, the 3, and then the 1-4. And 14, again, is the path of Daleth, which is right, below the Trinity, but also None, which is the path of death. And so death being, again, the door of Daleth, the door of death, being the 4th. I don't know. It's just it's all connected in a weird way. Not even in a weird way, in a very clear way. And again, the diamond being like Vipassana, or the clear sight. It makes it actually hard to explain. But again, like the 314, so I keep going back to it. The 314 and that spiral thread, a long time ago, whenever I was like beginning studying all this stuff, I sort of saw like my initiation as like, it's like you're trying to find a thread, like a starting point. And then from that starting point, you make your way in all these circles, and then you keep finding this sort of like full circle thing and like in your studies over time, and it happens so many times, but it keeps going, so it's like a spiral. And I don't know if that makes any sense. I really can't explain it any better. You know, but I was just looking at this pi book, and the whole thing about the circle being 666 and the circle being the sort of primitive basis of all like measurement and calculation and time, and pi, the Babylonian value of pi. I don't know. It's just like, I don't see how other people don't see this. There is a sort of like cover up, it seems like. I was intrigued by the history of all these different books on this subject of like the warfare between science and theology, and the fact that maybe there's not so much of a difference, which Theosophy kind of shows, and Blavatsky and all the people she influenced. But so conflict thesis is a term for this historiographical approach in the history of science, which maintains that there's an intrinsic intellectual conflict between religion and science. And I'll say that there is, but there's also some similarities in the way people go about, pretty much promoting their ideology. In that the relationship between religion and science inevitably leads to hostility. Examples to support this thesis have commonly been drawn from the relations between science and religion in Western Europe. The thesis retains support among some scientists and in the public, while historians of science reject the thesis. Because there's a lot of caveats. It's never like one way or another, and unfortunately, scientifically minded and skeptical type people need to be a little less like polarized and jumping the gun and throwing the baby out. I mean, all these different phrases. I don't know how clearly what a clear way to put it would be, but there just needs to be some, like, I wouldn't say revision, but because revision means like rewriting history in some people's minds, but we just need to not consider history over and done with, especially like these books. I wish I had the time. I mean, these videos I'm making are already too long for most people, but these books need to be reread chapter by chapter and analyzed and discussed. So I really need to get to them slowly, one by one, instead of keep jumping ahead. But in the 1800s, the relationship between religion and science became an actual formal topic of discourse. While before this, no one had pitted science against religion or vice versa, though occasional interactions were expressed in the past. More specifically, it was around the mid-1800s that discussion of science and religion first emerged before this time. Make sure it's recording okay. Science still included moral and metaphysical dimensions, was not inherently linked to the scientific method, and the term scientist did not emerge until 1834. The territories of science and religion. The scientist John William Draper, and he's the one who wrote two of these books that, like, the history of the conflict between religion and science. See, their titles are so long, it's hard to remember. But I know he wrote two major ones. And I had first heard of him through... Which one was it? This one. The History of the Intellectual Development of Europe. And it's like 2 volumes, but... Let's see. On the Government of Nature by Law of Europe, its topography and ethnology. And see, I confused this book with this William, or what's his name? Yeah, John William, no. This one. The History of the Rise and Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe by William Lecky. And let's see if we can find a PDF. I mean, I have the physical books, but anyway, this book right here, it's also 2 volumes, and it starts out by talking about like the primitive ideas of magic, and there's a lot of different books. Like if you look into the academic study of magic, it essentially is the same study as anthropology itself and literature, and it goes back to primitive times, obviously, because that's where human beliefs originated, and slowly science kind of developed looking for cures and all the sickness and diseases. Obviously you had like witch doctors and shamans, and then slowly doctors, and with the church involved in kind of regulating everything, obviously scientists and chemists, alchemists had to work in secret, even by being grave robbers. I mean, the whole history is deep. It's the history of humanity itself. So what I think they don't want people to do is like take it seriously and look at all this stuff. I mean, no one wants to do that anyway. People want one book to summarize it, and that's it. But unfortunately, you're gonna have to do a little bit more research than that, unless you want to be told. Like, that's the whole problem, is you're either taking people's word for it, or you're going through the, I mean, even reading books is technically taking people's word for it, but unfortunately, that's the value of looking at different things and different periods, and people, even to see where they're wrong and be critical. Because, I don't fully agree with these guys who criticized religion and all this, because, those people, you can't criticize, it's like philosophy, it's an endless fucking debate, and no one really knows, but with every debate, you're getting a little more data to compare and contrast and consider. And again, it's like, the whole problem with religion, though, is that faith is like an excuse to not do very much, or to just give up, or to let go, and it's an apathy pill. And there are some virtues, like Christianity, it's like if you want to focus on trying to be a good person, and resist temptation and all that, that's what I think some people, that's again where the emotions come into play, because you can convince yourself of if you're stuck in one religion and upbringing and study and all that, the emotions are going to be confined and building into that, feeding into that so strongly that you won't be able to question anything else. And any other, especially after your whole life, you're not going to be able to consider much else, and it'll be taken as literally a threat to that establishment, that shelter. And the shelter is 333, so it's like that shell, the Nautilus shell, which I think of in regards to this number. And then that open end, though, is where the 4 comes in. But anyway, so I could go on and on. It's just a lot of thought. My brain kind of works too much, and it keeps me from being able to to work at with one book at a time. But this whole conflict, because I love considering the different opinions, and I'll spend all my time watching YouTube and stuff, doing exactly that, of completely different topics. And I'm just perplexed as to why people willingly limit themselves. But like my friend said, I need to start considering like the way other people think about things, because I'm just baffled. But the scientist John William Draper and the writer Andrew Dixon White, and he's the one who wrote this book, fucking goddamn it, A History of the Warfare of Science with Theology. If I could get it to scroll down. Which is another big, thick book, 2 volumes in one. The Visible Universe, Ancient and Medieval Views Regarding the Manner of Creation. And see, again, I think it's important to study like these gradual developments of our views of reality, because in a way, it's almost like the focus, it's like HD compared to, if you look at all the different times, like generations basically, and the picture quality, I think our mind has also, been brought into higher definition than in the past. And, I don't know, it's just weird. To the point, who knows what our conception of reality what could be like generations from now. And I say our, as if I'll be here. But, people. Because I think our view of reality now, with everything so easy, and it's like almost like we're living in a complete different realm, psychically and in every way. And it makes you wonder, like, what's possible, and does it have to then be as shitty as it is at times if we pretty much create our reality based on our outlook? Theological teachings regarding the animals and man. See, and like all these different philosophers, I'm slowly working my history, or my way back through history. But, like, you can't just study and expect to really memorize all this knowledge unless it comes into some practical way. And for me, synchronicity and the way in which I study books, the way in which they come up with particular events, like in my life, that it's almost like messages or learning. It's like certain times in my life I'll have to learn some like subject or some lesson. And so for me, there's been people in history, obviously, like, who teach or who have learned certain lessons, and their life is like almost like a testament to that. And so I think that there's something to be said for synchronicity, and the way in which history itself kind of plays out in our lives individually. Obviously, this is a shitty copy. But yeah, so go look up. You can probably find this book for cheap. I found it for like $10. But it makes me think of this Milton Munitz book called Theories of the Universe. And it's like a compilation of all these different writings on different people's different theories of the universe. And I think, obviously, like, there's no one accurate one. You kind of have to look at all of them, and then even then, it's not going to be fully accurate. I think there's a lot of... That's the weird thing, is, like, reality, it's so elusive. Like, you can't expect to be explained with some, like, fundamental axiom or principle. Although numbers, for whatever reason, do play a role and like recur, but even then it's relative. And then this book kind of like refutes or what is it? It's just an argument against the like Draper guy and Lecky and a few other, just the whole like questioning of the pretty much especially the Catholic Church's role in suppressing science and intellectualism and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, well, they actually helped. And I kind of disagree with a lot of that. But again, it's never black and white. It's never one simple answer. And then this book is also another interesting thing that I found a physical copy of, but I pulled this up just for ease. Superstition in All Ages by Gene Meslier. And it was one of the original, or like one of the early books to criticize and question religion. But if you're like, that's the thing, there's like, you can question, or I'm not saying you can or can't do anything, but there's a lot to question from organized religion and their way of doing things and their hypocrisies and all that. But then it's a whole nother like ball game and field of study to study the philosophical and theological and scientific, like it all gets into one big giant, clusterfuck. And I think people are turned off by the fact that, like, especially because I was talking to a friend about this, like, some people have no concern about or care for any of this stuff because they've got a bad view of it from their upbringing or from people they hear about or whatever, like religion, the word is already in God and stuff. It's already like ruined because whenever people hear of it or hear it, they just think like bad things, boring sermons or religious dogma that can never be or is never fulfilled, by the people themselves promoting it. And again, it gets into politics, it gets into psychology, and but slowly over like the occult, studying things from the occult sort of angle has given me, I guess, a more refreshing sense of all this stuff, of history even. It makes it less boring and less controlling, I guess. Like, because if you were to go to church and try to expect to study your religion, you probably won't. You pretty much get bullied and into paying all sorts. It's just not what they make it out to be. But the occult kind of gives you I say the occult is just a coverall term for whatever you want. It gives you a sort of sense of artistic freedom, I guess. But at the same time, I mean, obviously their discipline is necessary, and it's almost like that's the problem though, is will and outside forces, just their interactions, you can never be in control. You can achieve modicums of self-control and stuff, but and the occult attracts people looking for money and power. And someone had mentioned to me, because I had said, it's just weird to me how these, whatever's in the news, I go and calculate it just to see, what does this possibly equal if it's some major thing. Like the Notre Dame fire or cathedral, the Notre Dame Cathedral, and it's like the blueprint number. Makes me think of that book by Fulcanelli about the mystery of the cathedrals. And all this work with 666 and just the Kabbalah I've been doing, and I've pointed out how the Notre Dame Cathedral is 666. And she's like, it sucks. How could we, you couldn't see this coming, yet we find the shit after the fact, and it's how would there be any sort of practical exploit? Can you exploit this sort of thing or what? But that's the thing about it's a gamble. And as soon as you like try to set it in stone, that's like the whole thing with prophecies and predictions. It's like a prophecy is kind of set so that it doesn't happen. Or, I don't know. It's just, how could you calculate the lottery? LOTTERY 333. It's again the time, the cosmos, the spiral, where relativity. But unfortunately, I think there are outside forces at play. Maybe we're not playing with a full deck of cards. I don't know. The spiral. Oh yeah, this book. First Principles of Theosophy. This book came, like I got this right when I was about to start reading this blog. And I was like, damn, I want to get this, to show some pictures from it, because it shows like the principles of theosophy, basically, of how it's not, how science and religion, or the teachings, the original esoteric wisdom, is not at odds with science. In fact, like, science is coming to prove it more and more over time, just with different terminology. But the esoteric wisdom kind of is just vindicated. And I'm not going to read that. This guy, Janara Jadasa, he says, Theosophy is the wisdom arising from the study of the evolution of life and form. This wisdom already exists because the study has been pursued for long ages by properly equipped investigators into nature's mysteries. So again, 333 and the gematria itself makes me think of this like field inherent in nature. Really the quantum field itself, the unified field. The investigators, who are called the masters of the wisdom, are those human souls who, in the evolutionary process, have passed beyond the stage of man to that next higher, that of the adept. As man is evolved to adept, he gains knowledge by investigation and experiment. The knowledge so far gained by an unbroken line of adepts is theosophy, the ancient wisdom. So, and it's funny because man, M-A-N, is 91, which is 1 through 13, and 13 being this like, number of initiation and alchemy. To me, it's symbolic of all that. Obviously, there's like this ladder of evolution. 13 is the symbolic of like the time and initiation, especially of man. And the whole Rosicrucian teaching and whatnot of like, after man comes technically Deva, or they call it angel, but that's some esoteric concept, obviously. But pretty much that's the thing. Theosophy teaches that above man is the higher man, or like the more, the solar consciousness, basically, which kind of, I don't know, the more I study it, the more I learn, but it somehow has to do with these teachings of, even in the Bible, of like the soul, the solar man, being clothed or in this fallen state of like having forgotten his true nature, which kind of goes with Theosophy's claim that we are evolving, but there's been some sort of like step back in a weird way in our evolution. Anyway, as man becomes adept, he ceases to be merely an item in the evolutionary process and appears as a master and director of that process under the supervision of a great consciousness called in Theosophy the Logos. So, and that's that solar, it's like the word, obviously in Greek, but it's like the source code is what comes to mind. He is enabled as a cooperator with the Logos to see nature from his standpoint, so to see it from a higher point of view, and to some extent survey her not as a creature, but with her creator. Such is a survey of theosophy, or such a survey is theosophy today. When masters of the wisdom, the agents of the logos, direct the evolutionary process in all its phases. So, and this is where like it kind of gets sketchy and hard to understand, I guess, in where Blavatsky talks about these like masters, these hidden masters in a way. It seems like each historical like round or period or eon or whatever has not an informing master like some higher being, that there's a sort of, it's an octave or a note, not an octave, but a note or a tone in a way, an archetype, a resonance that, because again, it's like with going around the sun, a clock, going around a cycle of some sort. There are angles of differentiation. And so, as with evolution, for whatever reason, I guess Theosophy believes that there's archetypal sort of stages, and they do anthropomorphize them, but they're not anthropomorphic like we think of them. They're not like someone you can really interact with. They form what is known as the Great Hierarchy or the Great White Brotherhood. They guide the building and unbuilding of forms on sea and land. They direct the rise and fall of nations, giving to each just so much of the ancient wisdom as is needed for its welfare and can be assimilated by it. Sometimes that wisdom is given indirectly through workers in quest of knowledge by inspiring them all unseen to discoveries. Sometimes it is given directly as a revelation. Both these ways are observable now in the 20th century. Indirectly, the masters of the wisdom who are in charge of the evolution of all that lives are giving the wisdom, the science of facts, through the invisible guidance and inspiration of scientific workers. Directly, they have given it in a body of knowledge known by the term theosophy. Theosophy is then, in a sense, a revelation, but it is a revelation of a knowledge to those who have not discovered it. But it is a revelation of knowledge to those who have not yet discovered it by those who have already done so. So in a way, it's like the future knowledge. And theosophy comes from theosophia, God and knowledge, or God and wisdom, God wisdom. And with a shin, it's Theosopia. Theosophia is 333, but then the Theosophy, or 555, the Theosophy is 333. So the God wisdom right there is the Higgs boson, the God particle. But, Theosophy is then, in a sense, a revelation, but it is a revelation of a knowledge to those that have not yet discovered it by those who have already done so. It cannot be... Oh, and 555, that number kept coming up, and I was, studying all this stuff. So apparently there's a word for, a descent into hell, or a downward descent, or just that hero's journey cycle, the circle I was talking about in post... I forgot what it was about, or what post it was. I know what it was about, but it was the way out is in. And it's called catabasis. Catabasis. And I was like, well, with a tau, catabasis is 555. And that's that number of the language of the universe, but also out of this world, and it boggles the mind, and energy tending to change. All these weird fucking formulas that have to do with, knowledge of this particular sort. Catabasis, though, a descent, to hell. If you look it up, it's like a mythological descent in a way, or a psycho-spiritual, whatever, psychomythic, and psychomythic with a shin is 555, because that connects to because Necronomicon is 555 in Greek. The Lovecraftian Kabbalah, all these things connect, and I've slowly found them over time, and they've just slowly aligned And again, it comes with reference, context, relativity, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, theosophy, it is a revelation. Oh yeah, what I was going to say is studying like the Tibetan tradition and all that, there's something called termas. And termas are like treasures, hidden treasures to be found by initiates or adepts or whatever, especially in the future. Termas is 555. And I look at the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, these chamber numbers, as sort of like concrescences. And a concrescence is a sort of a coming full circle, a concrescence of knowledge, or, again, of these binding wheels of wisdom or knowledge or whatever, experience. So, and there's a lot to the Tibetan Kabbalah. So, in Theosophy today, we have not the fullness of knowledge of all facts. Only a few broad facts and laws have been told us, sufficient to spur us on to study and discovery. But innumerable gaps remain to be filled in. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But it's taking time. It's not, again, I know it's not the best format. It's pearls before swine. They're not even the greatest pearls, but they're being filled in by individual workers in our midst. But what we have of knowledge is as a drop in the ocean to what lies undiscovered or unrevealed. Again, yeah, because it's like one puzzle pieces to an endless puzzle. Nevertheless, the little we have is of wonderful fascination and reveals new inspiration and beauty elsewhere. And also, yeah, the thing about this spiral, the beauty, the beauty of the spiral, because I was thinking of Tiferet and beauty earlier. The beauty of the spiral is the fact with cycles is like that's what gives you some stability, and when you learn what to expect, that's where you can not see the future, but you can learn what to expect, and it can benefit you. Theosophy today in the modern theosophical literature will be found to be concerned mostly with the evolution of life, but the knowledge concerning the evolution of forms gathered in every department of modern science is equally a part of the ancient wisdom. So I'm not going to keep reading all this. You should read this book, though. Read it all. Like it goes deep. I like the diagrams. And Charles Ledbetter, he's been, what is it? Like, had bad things. I guess he's done bad things. I don't know the full story, but I know his books are at least interesting, and those should be read too. And, oh yeah, there's this, Theosophy and Science, founded in 1875, the same year Crowley was born. This was an interesting article. There's like so many books I could reference. The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. The Dancing Woolly Masters by Gary Zukov. The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot I finally found in hardcover. I didn't even know it existed. It existed in hardcover. Yeah, I mean, Theosophy, Blavatsky, anticipated certain things. Like, she said there'd be new forms of energy discovered. There'd be new senses possibly developed. New elements discovered. New states of matter. And, it's not that far out. It's not like that out there to assume either. But the whole... essentially, the will to control nature is essentially what magic and witchcraft were aimed and geared towards, and their whole motivation was all about anyway. But again, motivation, I keep going back to this, but motivation, and that's what, again, gives this sort of power, I guess, it's where... what you're motivated towards. Some people are motivated towards wisdom and helping others. Some people are motivated towards you know, just getting whatever they can for the time being. 314, though, is not only Metatron, it's also the Almighty, or Shaddai. Its book, and Metatron is like mythologically said to be eternally writing names in the book of life. It's also Magus, or wise man, the king, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. So Metatron, and he's related to the whole Enoch tradition. There's some book called like the Enoch Metatron something, the Enoch Metatron tradition, Andrei Orlov, and it just happens to be like number 107 for whatever, it's just, again, alignments. There's a lot to. I got like really obsessed with Metatron, even though anytime I would try to bring him up to anybody, they were like, "You mean Megatron from Transformers?" Apparently, no. I mean, no one reads ancient Hebrew literature, so can't really expect much. This book I ended up coming across. I have Spiritual Body and Celestial Earth by this guy, but I want this book, The Man of Light in Iranian Sufism, because he talks about the black light and just the whole idea of like what's that book by G.R.S. Med, the doctrine of the subtle body in the Western tradition. And this is obviously in the Middle Eastern tradition. But even that Spiritual Body and Celestial Earth book talks about like it made me realize like maybe there is more, maybe not Islam as we know of it, but Sufism and Middle Eastern mysticism. It was really deep and interesting. And pretty much all I'm doing here is like referring to all these books that only I will ever probably read. Maybe other people, I don't know. I doubt it. This book is also really interesting. I found it for like $3 or $4 at a bookstore, and I can't find a real like PDF of the whole thing. But it's from a sort of theosophical, I guess, point of view, published by the Theosophical Publishing House. But he talks about the whole concept of God and the absolute being essentially a sort of like mathematical and essentially Kabbalistic, thing that emanates into the matrix of reality or mind and whatnot. I don't know. It's just very complex, but at the same time simplifies it. I recommend that book. Someone asked me a long time ago if I'd ever read Septenary Man, and I had to look it up. And it's a sort of like simple theosophical introduction to theosophical concepts, I guess, of the mind and the different levels of the body, the subtle body, I guess. And again, the subtle body is 999. Being the hyperdimensional matrix, it's like the true nature, I think, of the self or the soul or whatever, isn't just the three-dimensional here and now. If you really were open-minded to the idea of like the true nature of reality, obviously it's a continuum, and it's hard for the ego to comprehend it for its own sanity purposes and survival mechanisms and whatnot. But theosophy kind of implies that basically it is a continuum, and it's even a continuum beyond the ruach or the ego, as long as there's a sort of central, again, a magnetic energy center in the first place. Otherwise, that's where this whole like concept of NPCs and organic portals and all that keeps recurring in the public consciousness, I guess, or the public discourse, the hive mind. It's funny. Dream people. It's all a dream.